Lewis Hamilton exposes the shocking truth behind Ferrari's team order to let Leclerc through at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Stay tuned until the very end to witness Hamilton's explosive reaction against Leclerc. I promise you, what you're about to see is something no one has ever explained to you before. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. What happened in Baku went far beyond a routine exchange of positions between teammates. The incident involving Lewis Hamilton was not defined by the numbers on the timing sheets or by the lonely point that separated 8th from 9th place. It was a battle that unfolded in a way only the sharpest observers could grasp, a clash of authority disguised as a minor shuffle in the midfield. For millions of viewers at home, it appeared to be nothing more than Ferrari tidying up strategy, nothing unusual, nothing spectacular. Yet behind the cameras, behind the calm voice that came through Hamilton's radio, there was a silent war of wills. The team had spoken. The command was absolute: yield, fall in line, show obedience. Hamilton, the driver who has built a career on redefining what it means to be relentless, heard the message clearly. He acknowledged it. He backed off. He moved away from the racing line in a gesture that looked, on the surface, like total compliance. And yet, by the time the cars crossed the finish line, the reality was shocking. He still finished in front. The difference, just 0.4 of a second, might seem trivial to anyone not immersed in the world of Formula One. But in truth, those 0.4 echoed louder than any team radio message, louder than the roar of the Ferrari engine, louder than the carefully curated image of unity the Scuderia has tried to sell. That tiny margin was not a gap, it was a statement, one that said, I may bend, but I will never break. I may listen, but I will not surrender my essence. It was the clearest possible reminder that Hamilton is not simply another cog in the Ferrari machine, not a man who can be slotted neatly into a role defined by others. He has carved his legacy in defiance, in moments when others would have shrunk back, and this was another page added to that story. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Inside Ferrari, the official line has always been one of solidarity. They present themselves as a fortress impenetrable, unshaken by internal conflict, a team that moves as one body under the banner of the prancing horse. It is a narrative built on decades of myth, a mythology that has kept fans loyal through triumphs and heartbreak alike. But week by week, the cracks spread wider. Underneath the polished speeches and the red uniforms, there is friction, tension, a constant tug-of-war between personalities and egos. And almost unfailingly, Hamilton finds himself at the core of it. This is not by accident. He is a disruptor by nature, a competitor who refuses to blend into the background, a champion whose presence makes others question their own roles. Ferrari invited him in to lead them back to glory, but leadership is never a neat story. It is conflict, it is resistance, it is a reshaping of power. What the world witnessed in Baku was a glimpse of that process playing out in real time. Fans scrolling through highlights may have dismissed the moment, yet for those attuned to the undercurrents of Formula One, it was impossible to ignore. The radio command stripped Ferrari down to its bones, revealing a hierarchy that demanded obedience. And Hamilton, while appearing to give in, found a way to resist without ever saying a word. That 0.4 margin was not luck, it was not an accident, it was intent, a carefully calculated refusal to be diminished. In those fleeting seconds, as he crossed the line just ahead, he sent a message not only to Ferrari but to the entire grid: I will not be relegated to the role of a pawn. The beauty of the moment lies in its subtlety. It was not a grand overtake for victory, not a dramatic clash at the front of the field, but something quieter and, paradoxically, far more powerful. It was rebellion dressed as obedience, defiance masked as acceptance. That paradox is what makes Hamilton so compelling, what keeps his story alive after so many years in the sport. He knows when to play along, but he also knows how to bend the rules of submission until they break in his favor. And in doing so, he has shifted the internal dynamics of Ferrari, whether the team admits it publicly or not. The engineers, the strategists, the management, everyone watching in the garage saw it. They witnessed a man who did what he was told, and yet still took control. That realization does not fade overnight. It lingers, it spreads, it forces questions about who is truly in charge. Beyond the symbolism, there is the impact on the future. Every small act of resistance adds to a larger narrative, one that cannot be undone. The fans sensed it immediately, filling forums and social media with speculation, dissecting the timing, replaying the moment frame by frame. They understood that this was not about two cars in the midfield. It was about pride, about authority, about one of the greatest drivers in history reminding his team and the world that he is not a man to be silenced. The ripple effect of such an act extends far beyond Baku. It plants seeds of doubt within the team, challenges within the leadership, and expectations among the fans who will now watch every Ferrari team order with heightened attention. For Hamilton, it was another chapter in a career defined by pushing boundaries, by testing the limits not only of machinery but of politics, psychology, and human willpower. For Ferrari, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that bringing in a driver of his stature means accepting that control will always be contested. And for the sport itself, it was proof that even the smallest moments, the ones that look insignificant on the scoreboard, can carry the weight of a revolution. Baku gave us not a fight for points, but a fight for power. And in that fight, Hamilton reminded everyone that the authority of a team ends where the will of a champion begins. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. What looked like a routine message on television, just another clipped instruction from engineer to driver, was in truth something far more delicate, layered, and explosive than the millions watching could have ever guessed. The words came through Hamilton's radio in those final tense moments of the race, delivered with the emotionless cadence of a bureaucrat. 1.5 seconds behind you, let him by. To the casual ear, it could have been anything, an order about fuel saving, tire temperatures, delta management. But for those paying attention, for those who understood the political machinery of Formula One, those words carried an edge sharper than any battle on track. It was not just an instruction. It was a signal, a reminder, a stage-managed act in a theater where pride, legacy, and image matter as much as stopwatch numbers. Beneath the calm delivery was the weight of decades of Ferrari tradition colliding with the presence of a legend who refused to be reduced to a supporting role. What made the moment sting was not just the order itself, but the context. The call didn't arrive while Hamilton and Leclerc were locked in combat, wheels inches apart, sparks flying from the curbs. It didn't come during some strategic chaos where milliseconds determined the outcome. It came when everything had already unraveled, when the final push had dissolved, when the fresher tires that were meant to ignite a late charge had instead betrayed him. The chance to climb forward, to snatch positions that could have rewritten Ferrari's day, had evaporated into the night air. And in that void, when the outcome was already decided, the instruction landed like a stone in water: let him by. Not because of points. Not because of pace. Not because of necessity. But because Ferrari, ever mindful of its image, ever protective of its chosen heir, wanted to ensure that Charles Leclerc's place as the crown jewel of Maranello remained untarnished. The irony, of course, is that earlier in the very same race the roles had been reversed. Hamilton, alive with pace, had surged forward, slicing through the middle stages of the race with a clarity that reminded everyone of the champion he still was. And in that moment, it was Leclerc who had been asked to move aside. He did so with no fight, no theatrics, slipping over with a quiet submission that could only have stung internally. He obeyed because it was strategy, because the greater good required it, because Hamilton's speed demanded that Ferrari put their chips on the man charging forward. It was accepted as the logical thing to do, even if fans whispered about bruised egos. But when the mirror image appeared, when Hamilton was told to repay that favor, the situation could not have felt more different. This was not logic. This was not about extracting the maximum from two cars. This was not mathematics. It was politics dressed as procedure, and Hamilton, a man who had lived his entire career resisting hierarchies and rewriting hierarchies, recognized it instantly. For Hamilton, the sting was not in the words themselves, but in their meaning. To be told to stand down, to be told to yield not to performance but to symbolism, was something that cut deeper than any defeat. He had spent a career defying odds, crushing narratives, rewriting record books. And here, at Ferrari, he was suddenly cast in the role of placeholder, a temporary headline in the story of someone else's coronation. For him, the subtext was louder than the message. You may be the greatest driver of your generation, but this is not your kingdom. This is Leclerc's house. The engineers might not have said it, but Hamilton heard it clearly enough. He had joined Ferrari to prove that even in the twilight of his career he could still carve history, still win, still bend destiny to his will. But the radio call told him something different, that no matter how brightly he burned, the team would always dim the light if it threatened to overshadow their long-term favorite. Fans felt it too. In living rooms across the globe, in grandstands vibrating with noise, in the paddock where journalists scribbled notes furiously, there was a collective gasp. Nobody needed an explanation. The silence that followed Hamilton's lift, the hesitation, the subtle resistance in his throttle, said everything. He slowed, he showed that he was listening, but when the checkered flag came, he crossed the line ahead. That gesture, that act of muted defiance, was louder than any angry radio outburst. He didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't slam his steering wheel. Instead, he delivered something even more powerful: compliance just enough to show awareness, resistance just enough to send a message. In that split second, Hamilton crafted his own response to Ferrari's attempt at narrative control. The symbolism was inverted. The team wanted Leclerc to appear as the future, but Hamilton reminded the world that legends don't fade on command. Inside the Ferrari garage, the atmosphere was thick. Mechanics exchanged glances, engineers avoided eye contact, knowing full well that the decision would spark headlines far beyond the racing press. In the motorhomes, whispers spread. Was this the beginning of open tension? Would Hamilton accept his place? Would Leclerc resent the drama? For the Italian media, hungry for stories of dynasties and betrayal, this was gold. For Hamilton's fans, it was confirmation of what they had long feared, that Ferrari's romance with his arrival was already curdling into politics. For Leclerc's loyalists, it was validation, that the Monégasque remained untouchable, the future unchallenged, the symbol protected at all costs. The social networks lit up instantly. Clips of the radio message spread within minutes, fans dissecting every pause, every syllable. Some sided with Ferrari, insisting that hierarchy was natural, that protecting Leclerc's status was pragmatic. Others bristled, outraged that a seven-time champion was being asked to dim his light for optics. Threads unraveled across platforms, some recalling Hamilton's history of defiance at Mercedes, others drawing parallels to famous team orders of the past. The debate became not just about one race, but about what Ferrari wanted to be: a team driven by performance at all costs, or a brand sculpted by its own mythology. And through it all, Hamilton said nothing. No radio rant, no bitter interview quote, no public protest. But silence in this sport can be louder than words. The way he lifted, but still finished ahead, was his declaration. The way he climbed from the car, eyes forward, jaw tight, was his response. The team might have wanted to choreograph a simple ending, but Hamilton turned it into a scene that will live far longer than the race result itself. It was defiance wrapped in restraint, a reminder that champions of his stature don't simply bow to the script. They improvise, they disrupt, they remind everyone that control is never absolute. Leclerc's obedience earlier in the race looked like the kind of submission that a driver accepts when the outcome no longer matters, when the gesture costs nothing and risks nothing. He complied at a point where it was safe to comply, where following the call carried no real consequence beyond reinforcing the image of harmony within the team. It was neat, clean, and almost ceremonial, like a bow to authority for the sake of optics. Yet it was hollow. Hamilton, on the other hand, made his statement not with words but with the timing of his actions, and those actions were anything but hollow. His response came when the tension was highest, when the instructions had real consequences. By executing late, by refusing to dissolve quietly into the shadows of Ferrari's hierarchy, Hamilton turned a team order into a moment of rebellion. He demonstrated that the very authority trying to restrain him was fragile, dependent on perception rather than genuine control. In that single act, he exposed the difference between symbolic obedience and meaningful defiance. And it reminded everyone watching that Hamilton did not arrive at Ferrari to wear the costume of a background character. He joined to challenge, to reshape, to alter the very DNA of a team that has lived for decades on the weight of its traditions. He came to bend Ferrari to his will, not to bend himself to Ferrari's. For Riccardo Adami, the strategist who has carried the role of Leclerc's voice in the chaos of Formula One, the moment of issuing that order to Hamilton was not just a tactical choice. It was a collision with history. Adami's voice is one that longtime Ferrari followers know well, a voice that has often reflected the organization's muddled leadership, its coded hesitations, its tendency to speak in layers rather than clarity. Ferrari's culture of communication has always been as political as it is technical, and this moment was a perfect illustration. When Adami instructed Hamilton, he was not only asking him to change track position, he was speaking on behalf of the Scuderia's entire political structure, a structure that has been built to protect Leclerc as the team's long-term symbol. Every word carried the weight of that mission. Move aside. Reinforce the hierarchy. Preserve Leclerc's aura. Make sure the global audience still sees Ferrari as united, not fractured. Mask the experiment that Hamilton's arrival represented. Keep the illusion intact. But the illusion faltered. Adami's clipped tone, stripped of inflection, attempted to convey authority, but authority spoken in clinical tones often reveals its own fear. The moment the words reached Hamilton's cockpit, the fragility of Ferrari's chain of command was laid bare. The order was supposed to display strength, but instead it showed weakness. A seven-time champion does not hear those words as strategy alone. He hears them as politics, as pressure, as a demand to accept a role that he never signed up for. Adami was not simply trying to position cars. He was enforcing a narrative, one that pretended Ferrari was unbreakable, one that tried to silence the evidence that cracks were spreading across the walls of Maranello. Hamilton's refusal to play along with that narrative was not loud, not vulgar, not openly confrontational, but it was devastatingly effective. To most viewers at home, the cameras captured nothing extraordinary. The broadcast showed two Ferrari cars, draped in red, sliding across the line in the midfield without glory. The commentators spoke of finishing positions and lap times, but the deeper story was hidden. Freeze the images, slow down the footage, analyze the lines, and the truth comes alive. Hamilton's car eased off the throttle at specific points, visibly adjusting pace when he did not need to. He allowed the gap to shrink, moved deliberately off the optimal line, ticked all the boxes that make a driver appear compliant to team instructions. Every movement was carefully executed, as though to prove, yes, I listened, yes, I acknowledged. And still, the result betrayed the very intent of the command. Hamilton, after performing every symbolic act of obedience, still finished ahead of Leclerc. That is not unity. That is fracture, painted in scarlet across the asphalt. It was not a display of two teammates working as one. It was a message that even when Hamilton shows compliance, he will not yield in substance. It was rebellion without the need for slogans or interviews, defiance carried out through the elegance of timing, precision, and racing intelligence. He played the game Ferrari wanted him to play, but he twisted the ending in his favor. He gave them the appearance of order while delivering the reality of disobedience. It was subversion hidden in plain sight. The symbolism goes even deeper when viewed through the lens of Ferrari's legacy. For decades, the team has thrived on hierarchy, on building a culture where one driver is the chosen symbol of continuity and the other is the supporting cast. This has been the Ferrari way: protect the image of the number one, enforce discipline on the second, and project the aura of control to the outside world. By bringing Hamilton into this environment, Ferrari thought it could harness his star power without surrendering its structure. But Hamilton is not a man who bends quietly. He is not a driver who accepts being a placeholder in the story of someone else's rise. His career has been defined by rewriting scripts others tried to impose upon him, by refusing to remain within boundaries drawn by those who underestimated his resolve. At Mercedes, he did not simply race, he shaped the destiny of the team, turning them into a dynasty. At Ferrari, the same instinct is alive. He will not blend into Leclerc's shadow. What unfolded on track was not just a battle of lap times. It was the beginning of a power struggle inside the Scuderia, a duel between Ferrari's old way of doing things and Hamilton's refusal to be contained. Leclerc's earlier compliance now looks like a contrast that defines both men, one willing to submit when submission is easy, the other unwilling to bow even when pressured in the spotlight. And it raises an unspoken question: how long can Ferrari maintain its delicate balance before the cracks widen into a break? The answer may not come in press conferences or carefully worded team statements. It may arrive instead in moments exactly like this one, subtle, layered, full of signals that only the keenest eyes can see. Hamilton does not need to shout to make his point. He does not need to confront Adami publicly or challenge Leclerc openly. His rebellion is in the details, in the way he drives, in the choices he makes under pressure. And each time he crosses the line ahead in spite of orders, each time he proves that obedience on paper does not guarantee subordination on track, Ferrari's authority becomes less a fact and more a facade. The scarlet cars crossed the line, but the real story was hidden beneath the surface. For Ferrari, it looked like control. For Hamilton, it was the beginning of transformation. For those watching closely, it was history repeating itself, a great driver bending not to the system, but forcing the system to bend to him. Ferrari will attempt to present what happened as a small incident, a detail that does not change the trajectory of the championship, a mere adjustment in strategy that holds no real consequence. They will try to frame it as noise, as something blown out of proportion by the cameras, the media, and fans hungry for controversy. But what matters is not the words they speak in the paddock or the carefully chosen statements released to the press. What matters is the feeling that lingers inside the garage, in the quiet moments between meetings, in the nervous glances exchanged by engineers, and in the uneasy silences when mechanics avoid looking each other in the eye. Deep down, everyone within the Scuderia knows that something has slipped through their control. Team orders are supposed to serve a purpose, to show clarity, unity, and command. They are supposed to erase doubt, not create it. They are supposed to project dominance. And yet in Baku, Ferrari showed hesitation, revealed fragility, and exposed weakness. The order was clear. The attempt to comply was genuine. But the images that the world saw told a different story, a story of a team unable to impose absolute authority over its star. And in that moment Hamilton, without even needing to force the issue, sent a message that will echo far beyond one race weekend. Ferrari cannot fully contain him, cannot fully reduce him to the role they expected. For Ferrari, this single moment becomes a symbol of something larger, something far more dangerous than a simple tactical mistake. This is not only about points or positions lost. This is about perception, about how a team is seen by its rivals, its fans, and most importantly, its own people. In a sport where morale is as vital as horsepower, cracks in unity can spread like wildfire. The nightmare for Ferrari is not just that Hamilton resists control, it is that his resistance exposes the already existing doubts about the leadership structure, about the long-term direction of the Scuderia, about whether this legendary team truly has the vision to carry him, or if they will instead suffocate under the weight of their own insecurities. The higher the stakes, the more dangerous it becomes to cling to old patterns of control. They can respond by tightening the leash, by enforcing the hierarchy with greater severity, by trying to hammer Hamilton into submission with relentless reminders of who is in charge. But the danger in that approach is colossal, because Hamilton is not a driver who built his career by conforming. He is not an eager rookie grateful just to have a seat, nor a pliable youngster desperate for recognition. He is a 7-time world champion, a global icon, a figure whose words, actions, and even silences are amplified across every corner of the sport. When Ferrari attempts to impose itself too heavily, they do not merely risk losing a driver's compliance. They risk igniting open conflict. Hamilton has mastered the art of resistance, not through tantrums, but through presence, through political skill, through his ability to turn every microphone into a weapon and every interview into a stage. He knows that he does not need to shout to be heard. His status guarantees attention. If Ferrari tries to chain him, they will not simply face pushback inside closed doors. They will face the fire of public narrative, the weight of a global fanbase that will read between the lines of every radio call, every clipped post-race comment, every pointed expression during press conferences. What begins as an internal struggle could very quickly become an international storm, one that undermines the team's image and morale before the championship even reaches its decisive stages. Hamilton is uniquely dangerous to a team that tries to contain him, because he thrives on pressure. He has built his entire career by proving people wrong, by pushing back against systems designed to limit him, by finding ways to bend circumstances in his favor. He is not just a driver, he is a symbol of defiance, of ambition, of relentless hunger. Ferrari must recognize this truth. Trying to suppress him is not just futile, it is self-destructive. Forcing him into obedience risks killing the very spirit that makes him capable of extraordinary feats on track. Once a driver like Hamilton feels caged, he does not simply lose pace. He loses the connection, the fire, the trust that allows him to push to the absolute limit for his team. And when that bond breaks, when the belief evaporates, no amount of discipline or control can repair what has been lost. The alternative path lies in embracing him, not resisting him. Ferrari must understand that Hamilton did not sign with them to be managed like another piece of machinery, to be placed neatly into an organizational chart, to follow orders designed to protect the egos of those above him. He came to Ferrari not to be told who he is, but to show them what he can transform them into. He came to wear red not to follow, but to lead. The Scuderia has the chance to tap into the most valuable asset Hamilton brings, which is not only his driving ability but his aura, his experience, his ability to lift an entire organization through belief and determination. If Ferrari chooses to empower him, to give him the authority to shape the team's direction, to trust in his instincts and to allow his voice to resonate alongside their history, then they unlock the possibility of greatness. The question becomes whether Ferrari has the courage to do so. Because embracing Hamilton means accepting change. It means acknowledging that their traditional structures, their fragile hierarchies, their old ways of asserting dominance must evolve. It means allowing a driver to not only execute orders but to influence them, to not only race but to guide, to not only wear the badge but to help redefine it. Ferrari must decide if they want to be the team remembered for shackling one of the greatest of all time, or the team remembered for unleashing him in their colors. This decision is not about one race or one season, it is about legacy. It is about whether Ferrari chooses to remain locked in their own insecurities, or whether they dare to let Hamilton elevate them beyond the doubts that have haunted them for years. Right now, every mechanic in the garage, every strategist on the pit wall, every engineer staring at data in Maranello, feels the tension of that choice. They know that in Hamilton, they hold both a weapon of immense power and a force that cannot be easily controlled. If they try to silence him, they risk losing him not just as a driver but as a believer, and once that happens, the bond between champion and team is gone. If they choose to trust him, however, if they dare to give him the keys to not only the car but the culture, they may find themselves living through a transformation they have sought for decades. In him, Ferrari has both their greatest challenge and their greatest opportunity. And the world is watching to see which path they will take. What happened on that tense weekend in Baku cannot be reduced to the simplistic figures that appeared on the official classification sheets, numbers that told a cold story of 8th and 9th place, as if two Ferraris simply drifted into the midfield and left with nothing more than a handful of points. That was the version the statistics recorded, the version history books might one day show, but anyone who watched closely, anyone who listened to the radio messages, anyone who saw the hesitation and then the acceleration, knows that this was not just another race on a tight city circuit. What unfolded was something that cut deep into the soul of Ferrari and shook the very foundations of its authority. From the moment the pit wall gave the order, there was a silence, a kind of anticipation that hung heavy in the air. Team orders have long been part of Ferrari's DNA. Generations of drivers have been forced into compliance, told to yield even when their instincts screamed otherwise, reminded that the scarlet-red car is bigger than any single driver. Some have obeyed with clenched teeth, others with broken hearts, but few have dared to challenge the will of Maranello. The command that echoed in Hamilton's ears that evening in Baku was clear and calculated: yield, hold position, do not push beyond what we ask. For Ferrari, it was routine. For Hamilton, it was a test of who he was willing to become in the autumn of his career. At first, there was the faintest hint of compliance. He lifted, just enough to make those listening believe he might give in. Yet within seconds the decision crystallized, and Hamilton did what he has done his entire career when backed into a corner: he fought. He pressed harder, he pushed past, he chose defiance over submission. In that instant, the message was louder than anything spoken. It was not about pace, it was not about strategy, it was about identity. Hamilton had shown the world that even in Ferrari Red, even within the most traditional hierarchical team in Formula One, he would not become a servant to orders that clashed with his spirit. The implications went far beyond a minor position swap. For some, it looked like a simple misunderstanding, a miscommunication between the engineers watching data and the man strapped into the car. But for those who know the politics of Formula One, it was unmistakably symbolic. Ferrari has always carried with it an aura of absolute control. When the pit wall speaks, it is law. When the strategists demand, the drivers obey. That aura cracked in Baku. The illusion that Ferrari could tame anyone, even a 7-time world champion, was broken in front of millions. And once an empire's authority is questioned, it cannot be easily restored. The paddock immediately buzzed. Journalists whispered in corridors, rival teams watched with quiet fascination, and fans erupted on social media. Was Hamilton right? Should he have swallowed his pride for the sake of optics, to maintain the appearance of unity inside a team that is already fragile? Or did his rebellion reveal the truth that needed to be seen, that he cannot, and will not be controlled, not by Ferrari, not by anyone? The question hung in the air long after the engines went silent, and its weight continues to hang over Maranello like a storm cloud. Because the truth is, Baku was never just about two cars finishing outside the podium. It was about the opening shot in a battle for power. Ferrari is not merely a racing team, it is a political machine, a global brand, a dynasty built on loyalty and control. To defy that is to challenge decades of tradition. Yet Hamilton is not a rookie desperate to prove his worth, nor a driver clinging to scraps of opportunity. He is one of the most decorated champions the sport has ever seen, a man whose legacy is already carved into the fabric of Formula One. He does not need Ferrari to validate his greatness. Instead, Ferrari needs him to reclaim its glory. And that imbalance of power is what makes this story so combustible. Every race that follows will now be seen through this lens. Each radio message will be dissected. Each overtake, each defensive maneuver, each glance at the timing screens will carry more weight than it should. The dynamic has shifted. The garage is no longer united behind a single plan, but divided by whispers of mistrust. Engineers will question whether their instructions will be obeyed. Strategists will hesitate before pressing the button to give orders. Teammates will sense the instability and wonder whether alliances can be formed or if betrayal is inevitable. This is not just about Maranello, it reverberates across the paddock, because when Ferrari shakes, the entire sport feels it. For Hamilton, this is both a risk and an opportunity. He knows full well that defiance comes at a cost. He may face internal resistance, strained relationships, even sabotage disguised as strategy errors. Yet he also understands that revolutions are never won by those who stay quiet. By standing his ground, he has positioned himself not just as Ferrari's driver but as the central figure in a larger narrative, a man rewriting the rules of engagement within the most famous team in motorsport. His rebellion elevates him beyond the numbers, beyond the standings. It turns every lap he drives into a statement, every refusal into a headline. And for the fans, this is not something to watch passively. This is the kind of drama that transcends sport, the kind of tension that grips audiences and refuses to let go. People are not just asking who will win the next race. They are asking whether Hamilton will obey or disobey, whether Ferrari will bend or break, whether a dynasty will collapse under the weight of one man's will. This is theater as much as it is competition. This is not only about overtakes and pit stops. It is about loyalty, rebellion, and the human spirit refusing to be silenced. What began as a single act of defiance in the streets of Baku has ignited a story that will stretch across the entire season. The conflict is no longer speculative. It is alive, beating in every decision made inside that team. Ferrari may try to downplay it, may insist that harmony remains, but the truth cannot be hidden. The revolution has already started, and once it begins, there is no turning back. Hamilton knows it. Ferrari knows it. The fans know it. So when you look back on that 8th and 9th place, do not see it as an insignificant result. See it as the spark, the match that lit the fire. Because this is not about a championship table, it is about a war unfolding in real time, a struggle between legacy and freedom, between obedience and defiance. And if history has taught us anything, it is that Hamilton has never been afraid of war. He thrives in it. He grows stronger with every battle. The truth is clear, what happened in Baku was not the end, it was only the beginning. The civil war inside Ferrari has erupted, and the world is watching every heartbeat of it.